Hi, everybody. So, I thought it would be fun to look back at one of my short musical examples from a video last year and see if I could expand a few measures into something much larger. I didn't spend a lot of time looking, I just chose the first example from my piano to strings video from last June. It's only three measures long, and it's the sort of thing that's really easy for me to come up with. I just sit at the piano and play for a bit, and about 15 minutes later, I have a musical example for one of my videos. I never really spend a lot of time on any of these examples, and I think it would be an interesting challenge to try and expand one of these into an actual piece of music. If there's interest, I could try and expand some others from any of my earlier videos, so let me know in the comments. I get asked a lot how to expand and develop a short idea into a much larger piece, and there's no one correct way to do it, but I'll try to talk through the potential steps one at a time. Keep in mind that this three measure idea, I could imagine going a number of different routes, and I'm not going to explore different options in this video. I'm just going to quickly demonstrate and discuss my choices. So here's the original three measures. A few things to note here. I hear this as resolving almost cadentially on the G minor 7 sonority. Because of the cadential nature of this phrase, I hear it as almost a second half or a continuation idea within a larger overall phrase. I'll try to create an opening bit that these three measures can respond to. Normally, you might compose by starting at the beginning of the phrase, but it's sort of interesting to start at the second half and work backwards. I probably want the first half to have less motion and perhaps use a slower harmonic pace. I'll take the first two chords and treat that as the basic idea. So I'm making that descending second in the top voice an important motivic idea. I'll keep that in mind as I compose more. You'll notice that in the original, that descending second idea is immediately shifted down by a fourth. I'll keep that in the opening, but slow down the pacing a bit. So now I have two opening measures. Each measure is clearly separated into a one measure basic idea. I suppose I could jump from here right into the last three measures, but I could also repeat measures one and two. I'll repeat the basic structure, but change just enough so it's not an exact repetition. Here's what that might look like. So I give the upper voice a bit more lyricism to contrast with measures one and two, and I also change the bass note. I tried to connect measures three and four together at least more than I did in measures one and two. I think of this whole phrase as an evolution of an idea. So as it progresses, little aspects like rhythm or the bass notes or inner voice motion and melodic contour change over time. But I don't want to change too much at once. I want to maintain a cohesiveness throughout the phrase. So now that I have the original three measures at the end, I might make a few adjustments, knowing now where this idea comes from. I'll give the bass voice just a bit more motion, and you'll hear as I played these last three measures in, I played with more dynamic range as well. I'll add those dynamics in the score and a few slurs too. So, one last thing I want to change here. I'm hearing beats one and two of the last measure as a 2/4 measure, and then shift back to a 4/4 measure with the G minor 7 chord lasting four beats now. All right, so the next step, I have to decide where this eight measure idea occurs within the piece. Again, tons of options here, but I'm going to choose to actually write a bit more music that will come before this. I'll keep it related, but higher in register, and I'll gradually get lower as I go, eventually getting to the register of these 8 measures. Having music come before this seemed to work better for me, at least in theory. Again, because I hear that G minor 7 chord as sort of a significant moment structurally in the piece, and I think whatever comes after that chord will signal some sort of transition to a new section or texture. I don't think I've written enough of this A material yet to warrant something new, so that's why I'll add stuff in the beginning. Okay, so to do this, I sketched out the chords first and the approximate location of those chords. I hear this new opening material as a juxtaposition of the basic idea, now pitched much higher, with some contrapuntal material and strings and winds over static harmonies. Normally, I'd sketch this part on paper or just play it in the DAW because when you notate it in Dorico, sometimes it's easy to get locked into exact measures or rhythms or pacing. But I really just mean for these chords to be rough ideas, and I expect as I continue to compose, I'll adjust as I go. So here's what this might sound like. You'll notice that I'm starting in a different key area from that original 3 measure idea. So I repeat those 2 chords, which means the listener will hear it as an important component of the piece. The first repetition was verbatim, but this one is shifted down now registrally. So the chord makeup here is a bit different, but you hear it as an extension and a part of those first chords. And then I shift again, now moving the bass note from C to B flat. And with the B flat in the bass, it's an easier transition back into the original music. Everyone composes a bit differently, but for me, it's really nice to set up some kind of structure before diving into the details. I like to allow for my intuition to take over at times, but I have a much harder time making everything fit together if I were to only rely on a more improvisatory compositional approach. So next, I start adding in some of the details. I felt that I needed an additional staff in Dorico, so now I'm looking at a 3-staff short score. It's okay that this will no longer be playable precisely by a pianist. Most orchestral short scores won't be. I'll now also have 3 piano tracks in Cubase. This will help me get away from thinking about those lines as piano parts and instead think of them as individual components of the larger orchestral texture. It's also important not to get too attached or fixated on how the piano timbre sounds. The plan is to orchestrate this, and there are a bunch of very obvious timbral and technical differences between piano and orchestral instruments. For one, even with the sustain pedal of the piano, it can't really sustain chords in the same way that orchestral instruments can. So when I have a long sustaining chord in this short score, it'll sound very different when orchestral instruments start to play them. So I've done this process so many times for many, many years, and I've gotten used to hearing piano textures in this format as placeholders for orchestral instruments. But if you're new to composing in this manner, it might take some time getting used to. All right, so having said all that, I'll play through what I have here. It's about 2 minutes at this point, all stemming from those original 3 measures of music. And like I said, this is just a sketch, and I often change things later on. Little things like adjusting rhythms, adding a beat here or there, or bigger things like adding contrapuntal lines or inserting several measures of something. This is just one stage of the composition process for me, and I don't like getting bogged down by details too early on. I obviously haven't added dynamics at all, but when I played these into Cubase, I sort of naturally added some dynamics to give it shape. So here it is. So here's where I stopped working. I just finished the chord progression here by resolving the G minor 7, moving the bass note down step by step several times. I think ultimately I'll introduce a faster rhythm over this, maybe 16th notes or triplets. Not sure what it will be exactly, but I think this will transition into a new section, possibly at a faster tempo. In that first section, as I was filling in the details between chords, I realized that I had sort of written a new melodic idea, and as I continue to compose this piece, that idea will need to return at some point. You may have also noticed that I added a bit of music in the highest register over those original 8 measures, music that sort of responds to the first half of each measure. So after having listened to the new stuff that I wrote in the beginning, I felt that there was something missing from those original 8 measures, and I think this new high material really helps with that. Okay, so at this point, I could definitely continue composing more of this, see where it ends up. I don't really have any plans for this piece, it's just sort of a fun exercise. Or I could start orchestrating these first 2 measures of music and then compose the rest later. I was thinking of making another video doing either one of those things, so let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing one of those. So thanks for watching and see you next time.